So the film is called Ithaca, and it's called that because there's a poem from a 19th century poet called Cavafy, a Greek-Egyptian poet, and really, you know, it talks about Ithaca being the destination, and something that when you're fighting for a cause bigger than yourself, you know, you always have to have that cause held high in your mind. But it's not just getting there and getting to Ithaca, but it's also, you know, what you arrive there with, you know, the journey that you're on and the friends that you meet along the way, the things that you learn. And very important is not being afraid. And that's part of the poem as well, that fear, you bring it inside yourself, and not to be afraid when you're fighting an adversary that's the most powerful on earth is a very important thing.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Action for Assange. I am your host, Misty Winston. Sleepy Josh is here on the ones and twos, as always. So he'll be in the background hanging out. So I'm very excited. Just to give everybody just a quick idea of what the goal of these shows are. If you follow me on Twitter, obviously I've been talking about it there. But the goal of these shows is to highlight the people behind the movement. As you've heard me say millions of times, there are so many people across the globe who have done an incredible amount of work over the years who have never gotten the recognition that they deserve. Not that they're asking for it. They are the least, they're not the kind of people who request that kind of stuff. So, but I think that they deserve it. And I also want to use these shows as a way to have a conversation about the different campaigns that have been done over the years. What worked? What didn't? What can we use moving forward for further actions? Obviously, we're still working on a pardon. So I'm hoping to both give recognition to the people who put in a tremendous amount of work over the years, and then also have that brainstorming conversation as we move forward and do other things, not just with Assange, but with other any activism that you might be interested in doing. So we have with us tonight the crew from Boston. If you have been following the show for any amount of time, you know I love the crew from Boston. We talk about them on a regular basis. Obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with Paula Ayesela, who is here with us. Also, we have Julia Hansen, and hopefully we will have Susan McLucas as well. I think she's having a little bit of technical issues, so hopefully we can get those sorted, and then she will be joining us later. So just to give a very brief introduction of both Paula and Julia, I guess I could go ahead and intro Susan as well, just in case she's able to join us. But just to give a brief intro, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want them to be able to speak for themselves. But Paula joined the Assange movement in March of 2018. That was when Julian's internet was cut off at the embassy. She was brought in on the Reconnect Julian campaign, which was run through Unity for J. We've talked about Unity for J a billion times. Unity for J is kind of the reason why Action for Assange exists. Once those shows stopped, we wanted to carry it forward, and that's when Andrew and Taylor started Action for Assange. So she did a tremendous amount of work with Unity for J in 2018, 2019, helping to amplify global action. She made graphics, all kinds of stuff. October 20th through the 24th, she has been organizing with the Boston area Assange Defense, which she began with Susan McLucas, who again, hopefully will be joining us. In 2020, she helped organize actions with Action for Assange in DC. Not just 2020. I think you did lots of actions with us throughout the years. She also is the reason why the vigils outside of Merrick Garland's house were taking place. She was doing those pretty much solo there for a while, and then we got the DC group started, and they took over those, but she's solely responsible for the beginning of those. She also created what I think is one of the most important pieces of information or resources for all Assange activists out there, which is called the Assange Case Evidence Files. If you would like a copy of that, she's happy to send you that link for that. She created that in September of 2023, and it is a massive compilation of, I mean, just a ton of information about the case and all of the things, all the goings on all throughout it. So, and then obviously February through May of 2024, she also did the postcard and call campaign for House Resolution 934. So Susan McLucas, which again, hopefully she'll be able to join us. Longtime Boston activist. She worked against the CIA in the 80s and 90s, so she's our kind of people. She was a member of 25-year ongoing Saturday anti-war peace vigil, worked against Guantanamo for years, helped to free Chelsea Manning, was a co-organizer of Boston area Assange Defense. She helped with a petition to Senators Warren and Markey. She did the Boston handout, all of those types of things. She hand-painted signs amplifying updated status of the Assange case. And she created the very first U.S. Congress colleague letter, which was a campaign to 50 members of Congress with a list of signatories around the country. And we also have, sorry if I'm talking too fast, trying to get through it, Julia Hansen, who joined in May of 2022. She met the Boston group at the Harvard commencement speech, the Merrick Garland speech at the Harvard commencement, which was interesting. She also, her uncle, Randy Keller, am I saying that correctly, Julia? Keeler. Okay. Figured I would mess it up. His speech actually inspired Daniel Ellsberg to release the Pentagon Papers, which is a very cool little piece of history. She started a letter writing campaign to Senators Warren and Markey, plus did Zoom meetings and actions outside of Elizabeth Warren's house. Obviously, ultimately, Elizabeth Warren stonewalled us, or them, after 2 years of communication, which is completely unsurprising. And she's also a climate activist. And in 2023, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, in 2024, she did sit-ins and protested private jet hangar expansion, and also wrote a really informative article, and something that I think is really important because, as we've mentioned many times on this show, the Assange situation impacts literally everything, and of course it impacts environmentalism. And so she wrote an article called "Environmentalists Should Care About What Happens to Julian Assange." So I will include a link to all of that stuff. We can add it to the description. Also, I'll put it in the chat so everybody can check all that stuff out. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I appreciate it, and I'm very excited to start these shows off, so thank you. Okay, so Paula, I want to start with you because our audience is already familiar with you. And I want to get like a brief description of how the Boston area Assange defense got started. Obviously, just gave like a little brief, how you got involved through the Reconnect Julian campaign. But how did you and Susan kind of collaborate and decide to form a group there in Boston?
Yeah, that goes back to probably 2018 and 2019 when I met Susan. Someone in the Boston area was doing Assange actions like once or twice a year. And that's when I thought it was very, very important to bring this to Boston because we definitely had the group of activists there. And but I wasn't satisfied. Susan and I weren't satisfied with the way it was being run. So we looked at each other and said, maybe we should take it over and grow it. So that's what happened. So in 2020, we became official and we became a branch of the Assange Defense Committee. And so that's how I met Susan. I definitely couldn't have done it without her. She's an amazing organizer, and I think we complemented each other. And let me reiterate, I could not have done this without her. Just an amazing partnership, and I grew so much. I learned so much about bringing a show in from out of town, from Andrew Smith with Action for Assange. It was likewise with Susan, the determination, the steadfastness of an action no matter what. Our strategy changed a little bit in 2024. I was thinking we needed to focus more on campaigns directed at Congress. We branched off. I worked on the postcard campaigns and the call campaigns while Susan was there on the streets. We just divided to conquer, and it really worked out. I felt a little guilty about not attending the rallies that I had been attending for 4 years, but it seemed to work out in the end.
Yeah. And Susan, you've been a longtime activist. What was it about the Assange case that pulled you in? I'm always curious about people's origin stories, if you will, because I think everybody was called to this for different reasons. What was it about, Assange and the freedom of press situation that we have in this country that brought you in and made you want to get involved?
Well, I'm not sure, but I'd been doing a lot of work for Chelsea Manning for years before, and so we knew Assange as the publisher of that, and it just seemed like a natural extension. And also just, like everybody thinks, if we don't know what's going on, then, how can we decide what to do? And so, Paula was, as she says, that she was a really great partner to work with. I'm not sure I wouldn't have done as much anyhow, but it just seemed like it was the time and it was the issue. I mean, there's so many issues we all care about, but I don't quite know why I chose this. Gaza's important, Guantanamo's important, climate change, it's all important, but something about this guy who stuck his neck out knowing that he was going to make the superpower of the world really mad, but probably not thinking he might lose his life or spend his life in prison because of this. I just thought we should step up and try to help him if we could.
And we did.
Yeah,
We
something
did.
worked. We don't know exactly what the factors were, but
I think persistence, honestly. I think that just growing the movement and being persistent over the course of many years led us to a situation where they could no longer ignore it, which, I mean, I think it was a variety of factors. Obviously, I don't think it was just activism. I think there were some political things involved and all of that stuff. But for sure, the movement to free Assange, I think, made a tremendous impact. So, Julia, I wanted to ask you, obviously, I mentioned earlier that in May of 2022, you met the Boston group at the Harvard commencement. Were you already aware of Assange? Were you interested in Assange? I mean, obviously with your uncle, I'm sure that maybe you had some idea of who he was and things like that. But what was it that made you decide to join in with the Boston crew?
Yeah, for me, the time that I went to that very first Assange rally outside of Harvard Yard during Merrick Garland's commencement speech, that was really when activism was kicking off for me personally. I had not, I don't know if I've even gone to a protest before that of any kind. But I was in a place in my life where I was in the process of quitting a soul-sucking corporate job. And at the same time, I was learning more about my family history and that story that my uncle has, which, you know, as a peace activist in the 60s and 70s, he was part of the movement to, stop the Vietnam War and to prevent people signing up for the army. He served almost 2 years in prison for peaceful activism for that reason, but he encountered Dan Ellsberg, and Dan Ellsberg, who published the Pentagon Papers, credits my uncle for giving a speech that made him change his mind about whether to release the Pentagon Papers. And that history had been very kind of acknowledged in my family, but like I hadn't really thought about it before this time. And I just started thinking about that, certain things just lined up in my life. And so I saw this, somehow I got on some email lists that, and I got this message from Susan saying, join us at Harvard. And I lived in the neighborhood. So I just went and I heard, very passionate and well-spoken activists, including Susan, including Paula. Jill Stein was there as well. And so all of a sudden I was just awakened to the fact that I could do something against the sort of the injustices that I was kind of facing for the first time, or like the stories of injustice in the world that I was really thinking about for the first time. And because I was quitting my job at that point, I suddenly had a lot more time to think about it and to do something about it. And so that's what really got me into both the climate movement. I'm part of the Extinction Rebellion Boston climate group, as well as the Assange defense group in Boston. So those two endeavors for me were kind of parallel passions that started at the very same time.
That's cool. It's kind of in your blood, really. I mean,
Yeah.
It's kind of an unavoidable thing for you, I think. So just so everybody knows, I did just include Julia's article in the chat. I'm also going to drop the video of her uncle, if anybody wants to check out. And again, I'll add that to the description. If I remember, Sleepy, remind me, because I'll probably forget. But if anybody wants to check that out, that's there. Okay, I wanted to talk about specifics. I wanted to get into some details about some of the things that you all organized over the course of the years, because as we mentioned, we don't really know exactly what was most effective in turning the tide. Again, I think it was mostly just persistence and that kind of building momentum. But you guys were so unbelievably active. I mean, just relentless. I mean, what was it, Paula? Twice a week you were out there, generally speaking?
In the beginning, Misty, we were every week because it was looking like Julian was going to be extradited. And then for sanity's sake, we went to every 2 weeks. And then now we were every 3 weeks. because
Yeah.
we had other things going on, and that seemed to work out really well for us.
Yeah, and I think and you would go all over Boston, correct? Not the same location, different locations. What was, Susan? I'm curious what the public response was and how it shifted from the time you started doing it until more recently, because I'm sure that was a pretty noticeable shift over those years.
I can't be sure, but I'm pretty sure that we saw more positive response as time went on. We always had some people who'd walk by and make snide comments like,
Yeah.
Lock him up, and he's a traitor, and all these things. But we had quite a few people stop and sign our petition, quite a few give us a thumbs up. Of course, the majority of people who go by a protest just ignore you. And but I guess it was more positive than negative, and then overwhelming both of those things, it was indifferent.
Yeah, the traitor thing, that I started laughing. Our audience knows that makes me laugh every time. It's so ridiculous. He's not American, y'all.
How can he be a traitor to this country if he's not even an American?
No, not possible. And Bill Maher.
The absurdity of his being in jail while all the people whose war crimes he exposed are getting promotions.
Yeah. Yes. Are still in power, positions of power, are likely going to be remaining in positions of power. So yeah, the idea that people would call Bill Maher just recently went on a tirade where he called him a traitor. That was interesting because Chris Matthews was on that panel and he actually had like a very kind of neutral take. It was very strange. It felt like the world had been flip-flopped, but yes, the traitor thing always makes me giggle. So, and Julia, I mentioned earlier that the way that you kind of, you said you had those two things that kind of hit you at the same time, environmentalism and the Assange case. And we've talked about that here on this show numerous times, the importance of making those connections to other causes, because in my opinion, the Assange case literally impacts all things, everything. It doesn't matter what you care about. If you're an environmentalist, if you care about education, if you're anti-war, if you care about food safety, it doesn't matter what it is. You cannot fight for that thing effectively if you cannot speak, if you can't publish the truth, if you can't engage in conversation and dialogue. Was that something that, as you were kind of coming to these, these things that were kind of hitting you in the face, was that something that immediately struck you, or did you immediately make those connections?
I think it took me maybe about like 6 months or so to really see the overlap between, why I was dedicating all of my activism time to climate and to Assange in pretty much equal amounts, I would say, especially at the beginning. But what kind of got me to, think hard enough in order to write that opinion piece was, I think, when Biden approved the Willow Project, so drilling in the Arctic after making a campaign promise to not touch the Arctic. And so that was really, that was a huge blow. I think one of like the first major disappointments for environmentalists after Biden took office. And it just struck me like, how much we don't know about what went on behind the scenes in terms of coming to that decision. And there have been a lot of similar decisions since then. I think people are just like not surprised anymore. Biden is like, did some good things on the climate, did a bunch of bad things on the climate. So it's kind of neutral. But it struck me how amazing it would be if there were a whistleblower somewhere in Biden's cabinet or EPA that could tell us, how did this happen after these promises, after, I think this was only like a few months after that year's conference of parties at the UN on the climate change panel, where we've heard that like we are about to hit 1.5. And of course we did, the following year. So it was just such disappointment in what I see our government doing in terms of climate policy, and realizing that like we are so limited in our ability to hold them accountable if we don't know how those decisions get made, because it really came out of nowhere for the climate activists.
Yeah. Yes. And that's such an important point that, and I mean, Julian himself has spoken about this that in a slightly different context, but if you don't know the truth about where we are, how can you possibly make good decisions about where we're going?
Right.
And there's so much that is hidden from us on every issue. And that's what was for me, that was what struck me about WikiLeaks was that, they're actually like peeling back the curtain. They're actually showing us, and not, and I'm sorry if you watch the show a lot, you've heard me say this a gazillion times, but it's not conjecture. It's not opinion. It's not, some article based on, hey, this unnamed source said. It's the truth. It's 100% verifiable and authenticated source documentation. It's just the truth. That's it. Here it is. Read with it, do with it what you want. And I think that is such an invaluable service. And I wish we had 1,000 WikiLeaks all across the globe. And Paula, I should have given you credit. I'm sorry. The video that we showed at the very top of this hour was made by Paula, and that just gave some photos of all of the things that Boston has done over the years. And in talking about making those connections between issues, you included a lot there about Palestine, and I think that that's obviously right now that's very relative, unfortunately. And I think that that's something that over the course of the past, since October, a lot of people have started to make those connections about the things that WikiLeaks already has revealed, not just about Israel and Palestine, but about wars in general. And I think that we saw, for me anyway, I had a lot of people begin to kind of connect those dots and realize that those things are intertwined. What do you think about that? Because I feel like that's, again, that momentum that was built, the grassroots support, I think that was an accumulation of things. But I think that one of the big reasons for the growth that we saw was because a lot of people are fed up and they recognize the game that's being played. And I think a lot of people were then starting to look for alternative sources of information. And then they started to, make those connections and realize that Julian Assange was doing this years ago. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was really important for us to pivot some of our attention to what was happening in Gaza. It was just unbelievable. There was no way for the Assange activists to ignore that. So we created a flyer, a 2-page flyer that showed, all the releases from WikiLeaks, showing the corruption from the diplomats and that between countries, stalling this, and just the corruption. It was and the crimes of Israel. And Susan and I and Tom Sorelli, we tried to go to events that were Palestine related in Boston. We went to Susan brought it to my attention tonight that we went to in December of 2023, first night we showed up for an Assange action. Then we went over to, Susan, where was it? We took a short walk and we went and joined the big Palestine
Government Center.
Thank you. We joined a big Palestine march there, and just trying to fit in with our half Palestine, half Assange signs that show that they're related. So it was our duty to show the connection between what's happening in Palestine with telling the truth, and the whole media lies. The only way they can get away with that is by media lies. And so I think we did our best showing up where we could. And it was very important when I created the video that I wanted to bring Roger Waters into it, because Roger Waters' activism penetrates his art. And so we love that about him. He's got this large platform. They've tried to take him down, but he fights for Palestine. He fights for Assange. And that's how the Garland Vigil got started. It was a musician in Milwaukee that loved Roger Waters' music. He loved Waters' activism. He said, it's really, really important to bring that in front of Garland's house. And so he sang Pink Floyd tunes in front of Garland. And that was the very first Garland vigil. And of course, I'm not a musician. I knew the vigil was important to continue, but that's how it got started. It got started with an artist. And so my thing is always follow the artist, because
Yes.
know the truth. They generally are on the right side of history. The sign behind me was a campaign that David Dormino did years ago. It was some red and blue campaign with people holding their fist up and half their face painted red and half blue for truth and courage. And so I remember that. And so I did a banner because artists understand they can get to the crux of things. So,
Yes.
so Palestine is very important. I included it as the end of the video to lead into the human rights that were denied Julian. It's all connected, you know.
Yeah, for 100%. Yes.
One
and
of
by the way,
things
Susan.
that I like about the flyer that Paula created about the different releases that WikiLeaks made about Palestine was that 2 weeks after October 7th, the Israeli intelligence came out with a document not meant for public consumption saying, okay, here's our plan.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the Palestinians to leave the north, bomb the north. Tell the Palestinians to leave again and bomb the south, try to open up the gates and just chase them all into Egypt.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's been happening.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's why it is so important to make those connections, because I mean, listen, we need whistleblowers, and I'm so glad that you brought up following artists, because you're right. I think that artists are always I think they see things slightly differently, you know what I mean? And I think that they have this ability to perceive what's underneath the surface. And I think that's so valuable. And Roger Waters, I mean, we should once again give him credit. There were some pictures there included, but he allowed for us to table all across the United States. I think also in Mexico. Did he allow Mexico too as well? I can't remember. But a lot of his North America shows, we will say, he allowed Assange activists to go and table at his shows, which was unbelievably successful. At least Andrew and I had a ton of success. We did 2 shows, Columbus and did we do Cleveland? Cleveland. I can remember Cleveland or Cincinnati. But we did 2 shows and they were hugely successful. It was really cool. It was the right audience. I think Roger's audience is already finely tuned to those types of things. And I think that was such an unbelievable resource that he provided to us to interact with people face to face, lots of people, tons of people. And I think that was incredibly beneficial and at a really opportune moment as well. I mean, it's just you just can't give him enough credit, really. So let's talk a little bit about some of the more specific actions that you guys have done. And Paula gave me this amazing timeline, just looking at some of the stuff that you were able to do and places you were able to go. The amount of visibility that these things brought, I think, are so incredible. But I wanted to talk a little bit, not about like a street action, but the recent postcard campaign, because that I think was so well timed. And I think Paula, I don't know if it was all entirely your idea or if it was a group decision to kind of push on House Resolution 934. I think that was so really just invaluable, I think, for various different reasons. For the first reason, I think if you would have told me even just a couple of years ago that we would have bipartisan legislation in the House that mentions Julian Assange by name and calls for his release, I would have been like, sure, right, definitely, that's happening. But it did. And I think that was, to be able to jump on that and capitalize was so incredibly important. But I also think it came kind of on the back of the DC6 visit from Australia, where we had numerous politicians from across the ideological spectrum from Australia who came to the United States and engaged in meetings with members of Congress and encouraged them to support Julian Assange and press freedom. And so I think all of that was so well timed, and I think it created a real sense of pressure. So whoever wants to talk about it, was it Paula? Was it you that came up with the postcards? Was it a group decision? How did that all come about?
It was, but let me back up. So you know me, I organize by myself. I have my own Twitter or campaigns that I do in a vacuum that who knows who sees them. And I organize in DC. And I just have to say that when Julia joined us, she breathed so much air into Susan and I, just trudging along, just keeping it going. And we just, no matter if our action has 5 people. And Julia joined us and she said, we need to go out in front of Senator Warren's house. And Susan went, oh, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So between the 3 of us, I was definitely with Julia on this. Oh, yeah, let's go. Let's just go full tilt on this. Susan, we listened to Susan. Susan said, we have to do it by the book. We should start a letter campaign, start lobbying. And I tell you, that was a turning point. When Susan had us do that, we lobbied the senators in the most amazing way. We did all their homework that they threw back at us. We wrote dissertations, like trying to tie it into their lane, which is totally, I mean, we got to see how the sausage was made through Markey's legal counsel. She told us it has to fit in their lane. So Julia and I worked on a dissertation to show how WikiLeaks works for the marginalized people. And so we don't even know if they read it. We never heard how, if it was put before Warren's vision, if she even saw them. So that got me thinking, the anger started to rise, and I said, damn, the Congress has not been targeted yet. That needs to happen. So when HRES 934 came along, I took that pent up anger toward certain things that hadn't been done in the United States. And that's when the postcard campaign came up. I said, I am not going to let this resolution go into the dumpster. Okay, look, it's another thing. Let's make a few phone calls and then throw it away and forget about it. And I was just, I wrung it dry. I had a campaign going. I had my own little postcard campaign. Ann Batiza, I said, so first of all, we don't do our actions in a vacuum. We all have our people that we run things off of, on my Boston group. I have Ann Batiza. I have other people that I run my ideas past. And I loved Ann's list. She had done a tweet where she listed, how can Assange expect a fair trial in the United States after the CIA spied on him, stole the content, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what do you think about that being an HRES 934 postcard? Didn't have anything to do with 934, but it was a wake up. We were trying to educate Congress, right? So Ann liked the idea. And then Ann took it a step further. She said, we're going to have 20,000 cards printed. So each member of the House, 432, are going to get 50 cards each. And I said, you're out of your mind. How are we going to make that happen? She did. She found a donor for the 20,000 postcards. We got them.
Ann is awesome.
I know. So that was inspiring in itself. And then, and then I thought that led to the senator's campaign, because we might as well educate all 532. And after I did that, I said, my job is done. We have put the Assange case before every member of Congress now. Yeah. And so we have many people to thank for doing that. It's like I always say, each campaign is built on the foundation of other people's campaigns.
100%. Yeah. Yes. And that's, I think, what's my favorite thing about the Assange movement. It sounds cheesy, but I don't know what else to say. It really was incredibly decentralized. There really wasn't a hierarchy or a boss or anybody leading it. It was all of us individually trying to pick up ideas from each other and figure out what works and what didn't. And I think that was, it was just really cool to see that grow over the years. And it was all across the political spectrum. I mean, we all believe different things, and I'm sure we disagree on all kinds of stuff. But it didn't matter. We were able to come together on this one issue. And Julia, you sound like me, because I'm always, let's go, let's do the thing, let's do all the things. And Ann sounds like the person I need in my life to keep, rein me in, calm down, take a second, let's breathe. Because I tend to be very much gung-ho. Let's do all of the things. Let's be loud and rowdy and all of that stuff, which Some people don't like that approach. I can't help it. That's just who I am. So, but I think that the postcard. Go ahead,
Paula. Tell the story about the postcards to the attorneys at the Justice Department in the New York Times.
Oh,
I think I've beaten that to death. But so Stella tweeted a quote from the New York Times article that came out after he was freed. And overall, it was a pretty trashy article. But in there, they were speculating what led the DOJ to move forward on the plea deal. And it said that they were, the DOJ was getting tired of this ongoing case. So they were tired of this troublesome case, right? And U.S. attorneys were being targeted by Assange supporters. And I read that 2 or 3 times, and I said, who are they talking about? The Assange supporters? And I said, that's us. That was our postcard campaign where we included, thanks to Kelly Lane for planting that idea in my head about 1.5 years ago when I was doing the Garland Vigil. She said, you should go outside the U.S. attorneys that signed their names to the superseding indictment. And I knew that was a great idea. It wasn't something I wanted to do, go in front of their houses. I didn't feel comfortable even being in front of Merrick Garland's. But I always remembered that. So I included them in the senators' postcard campaign. So they each, including Kronberger, is it Kronberg or Kronberg, they each received about 40 postcards each. So that U.S. attorney, room 342 or whatever it was, received 8 times about 400 postcards. And so we mission accomplished on that. We brought them out into the light is what we did. Nobody knows Traxler or Hunter, or we know that Terwilliger, I think he involved in the grand jury indictment of Chelsea Manning that threw her back in prison for 1 year. So these people are unknown. So it's good to shine a light on them because they have no problem shining a light on Julian's life and making a target.
100%. And that's, a shout out to Kelly Lane for, again, it's all of us like feeding each other ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other. That's why, to me, that's why it was so successful. But up until that point, I think that they had flew under the radar. Nobody was really paying any mind to them. So I think that was brilliant, and we are troublesome. I mean, I'm okay with that label. I'm okay. Just so everybody knows, it is currently storming here. So I hope I don't lose power, but if I do, I'm sorry. Sleepy's about to get it too. So Sleepy's going to get it worse than me. There's potential tornadoes headed his way. So, okay. Susan, what would you say? And maybe it's hard to kind of recognize what is what's a successful action or whatever, but what was something that was it the postcards? Do you think that the street actions were more I don't want to say important, but I'm just trying to get an idea of what worked best for you guys as a group?
Well, as I said before, we don't know what actually made this happen, but I enjoyed just keeping it going, being relentless. I remember there was one time I was out there in the snow with one other activist, and we were handing out our papers, and we had to keep the pile of them, under our coat because they would get all soggy, and people would look at us like, oh my God, these people never stop. And I said, oh yeah.
Yeah, you all really were relentless. And I love that. Like, I always felt a little guilty because I couldn't be on the ground all the time. I mean, I have young kids and things like that. So but like watching the work that you guys did and how relentless you were, I think it's inspiring to me as just an activist. That's why I try to hype you guys up as much as humanly possible. And
I liked it when we had things that, I guess we could have put up posters for all of our actions, and we didn't usually. But when it was time to the protest at the State House on day X, the day that his final hearing was happening, I made a poster for that and put it all over and got some new people that way. And when we were getting ready for the showing of Ithaca in March of 2023, we had a lot of postcards for that, and we filled that place. I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
And, anytime that you can just get something up so people, walking down the street, oh, Julian Assange, is he still in jail? Or maybe they don't even know, but who's that? Then they find out.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. It's just planting those seeds, I think. Just getting eyeballs on it. Because most people in this country, I think, are oblivious to who Julian Assange is. Or maybe they've heard of him and they're like, oh, yeah, he's that weird WikiLeaks guy, right? Like they don't really know who he is or what's happening to him.
Right.
I can't tell you the number of times.
There was our member, Tom Cerulli, who who got started when we did our banner drop around day X. And he just said, I've got some time. And he started going out every week and holding a banner over a big highway and close to where he lives, I think in New Hampshire. And then we said, hey, if you're going out with a banner, here's a second banner. So he had one for both sides. And think of the thousands of people who's Julian Assange.
So simple too. Just, going out for a couple hours and holding a banner. And it's, listen, I think people underestimate how expensive activism can be. Paul and I have had this conversation numerous times because we've both spent a lot of money out of pocket over the years. I'm sure both of you have as well. But I think it's something as simple as like holding up a banner or, just like Andrew started Action for Assange by literally just making his own little flyers with a marker and a regular piece of paper and just going around and hanging them up. It can really be that simple. And I think that sometimes people get a little in the weeds about how extravagant it has to be or whatever. And listen, it's always nice to have like a big rally with speakers and a sound system and all of that stuff, but it doesn't always have to be that. And so really anybody can get involved. Julia, I want to ask you, because Paula mentioned that you kind of breathe new life into it. And I love that because we were tired. All of us were very tired, and there's been new people that have entered in, and that always seems to be the case where you have that kind of fresh energy where people are excited about it and they're ready to go. What was that like? Like, could you tell that they were a little tired and exhausted? Because we were very tired. So I love hearing that like you joined up and like breathed new life into the actions that they were doing.
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't tell when I first joined. I was just so enthralled with what I was learning now that I had like put my attention on it. I couldn't tell that they were exhausted. But I think I came in with a lot of energy for doing civil disobedience and getting in politicians' faces. And that's sort of the angle that I've also taken in climate activism as well. So for me, it just felt like the natural thing to do, given that like I lived in Elizabeth Warren's neighborhood in Cambridge, and my friend and I had like gone on walks and like seen her walking her dog. So like we knew she was right there. How could we not go say something to her? And in fact, I think backing up on that idea, I had one conversation with Dan Ellsberg before he passed away. Because my uncle was so excited that I was finally kind of like getting into the activism,
the family business.
And Dan Ellsberg, who has had been so supportive of Julian Assange, told me on the phone, like, maybe Elizabeth Warren is the most likely senator to be able to sway Biden on this issue. And so that, in combination with living very close by and being able to say, like, let's go to her house, and like being like very, very feasible. I think that's what got, for me, the wheels turning. And then we kind of stepped it back a little bit and like, you know, kind of took it in, you know, through the paces of writing letters. Susan and I went to a couple of town hall meetings that Elizabeth Warren hosted. And so we were able to, you know, stand in the selfie line, go up, shake her hand and say, we've been trying to get in touch with your office for months to tell you about Julian Assange and the need to stand up for press freedom. And so that kind of interaction doesn't give a lot of time for having a conversation about it. But I distinctly remember her expression changing and like her handshake changing from, oh, look at this sweet young woman who's going to give me a compliment, to like, oh man, I don't want to have to listen to you right now. but she heard it. And so that was the point. So we know that she knows that we were trying to get in touch with her and educate her office. So even though it's a black box, after we have conversations with her members of staff or send letter after letter to her office, sometimes I even hand delivered the letters to her house. So we know that she knows, and that is at least some sense of like accomplishment or security that like we know that our message was getting across, even if we don't know what happened after it crossed the threshold into her office.
Yeah.
So as Susan was saying, like I think we don't know. We don't know what conversations happened as a result of our targeting her office and Senator Markey's office. Also, Ayanna Pressley, we were in touch with her office as well. It's easy to feel disappointed in them, and I really do. Like I went from believing that Elizabeth Warren was going to, you know, stand up for the little guy yet again in this particular political case, but we don't know what conversations happen behind closed doors.
But putting that pressure on, I think, and knowing like face to face that you've had that conversation with them, they can't say, oh, well, we didn't know. I didn't know. I had no idea this was going on. We had a similar situation with Rand Paul, actually. Kendra and I went to Freedom Fest. We had a table. I was there with TNT Radio, but they were also allowing me to, they paid for me to go, but they were also allowing me to do Assange stuff while we were there. And Rand Paul was one of the speakers. So Kendra went and stood in his line and bought a book to have him sign it, and confronted him because, I mean, he's Ron Paul's son. Ron Paul has been an Assange supporter since day one. Where you at? You know what I mean? And so she had a very similar set of circumstances where his demeanor immediately changed and he got incredibly defensive. And I've written about it. No, you haven't. We watched the stuff very, very closely, my guy. You have not. But we had but I think that just that face-to-face confrontation and then them knowing, we know that you know, like there's no more excuse now for you to not be speaking on this issue. And obviously all of our politicians are endlessly disappointing. But I think that, I think that kind of stuff really does, if nothing else, it just lets them know that we're watching them and that they can't just be silent on this issue without, some pressure from activists. So I think that that's hugely beneficial. So, okay, we have a few minutes left before the end of the hour. And I just wanted to obviously we're going to start working on the pardon situation. Many of us already have. What are you going to take from the past many years as we move forward, working toward a pardon? Is the postcard campaign going to continue? What are some things that we can hype up to get the people who are watching this involved? Anybody, whoever wants to answer. Bueller?
I'm looking forward to sleeping a little more easily.
Right? Like he's out of prison? That's a little...
He's out of prison. Oh, it's just so wonderful to imagine, But, we are going to keep up pressure, and we haven't exactly decided how, when at our last rally celebration in front of the British consulate, we had a postcard writing party afterwards and used some of the postcards that Paula had already created saying free Assange, and we said pardon Assange. with those. What did we write about? I don't know, 100 or 200 that day, something like that. And uh, I think I'm probably going to take a lot of my energy that's freed up with Assange being out and put it into Gaza. Not quite sure.
Yeah, that's a good cause. And I assume, Julia, you'll focus a little bit more on environmentalism as well. I mean, obviously, we're going to continue to work on the pardon for Assange. I think that that's important. But again, we do have a little bit more time and energy now. I think him being out of prison is such a weight off of the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in horrific conditions, being psychologically tortured every day. So I feel like that's a big weight lifted. But I mean, will environmentalism be something that you're more focused on now, Julia?
Absolutely, yeah. But also to echo Susan, I'm so relieved that this happened and that I can take a little bit of a breath. I'm also going to be a mom in a few months.
Oh.
So I'll be kind of busy.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, ma'am. You will. Yes. Is this your first?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, you will definitely.
I will be a little busy.
Yes.
But I think continuing the postcard campaign and I also feel strongly about writing back to Senator Markey and Elizabeth Warren and Ayanna Pressley, because I have made, I've had so many sort of like personal interactions with their office and them at this point that I want them to know that they're not off the hook.
Yes.
So I think, coordinating with Paula and Susan about how and when and sort of, how to do that in conjunction with the rest of the Pardon Assange campaign. But I feel that I'm not satisfied with my 3 representatives in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to keep working on their offices, or at least, keep going to like their town halls or writing them letters.
Yeah. And I know, Paula, you're looking forward to stepping away a little bit, but I know I'm not dumb. You're not going anywhere. I know you keep saying that. And I want you to take a very long break. But I think that the pardon thing, obviously, we're in an election year. So I think it's an opportune moment to put that kind of pressure on, in particular, if Biden loses, which, for being real, is likely. As he moves into his lame duck, that really needs to be amplified. That pressure needs to be amplified. So I look forward to working with all of you on that for sure. So is there anything that we missed or that you would like to add, or any actions you want to hype up? Or go ahead, Paula.
I just want to say that the things that I thought were successful in a very demoralizing movement was the sharing of information. What Susan and I did for every single action, we wrote a newsletter that had links of articles and what was going on. We put those on Facebook. Susan sent out a press release. So they could choose to ignore us, but we tried, and it did land on somebody's desk. And so that sharing of information is very, very important. I have a very strong feeling that the postcard campaigns really work. If somebody wants to pick up the pardon Assange, that postcards are terrific if you can get a donor to do that. Kelly Lane and Matt Ho's candidates for Assange, that was inspiring, even though I'm not really crazy about thinking about electoral politics. It was a brilliant thing because it made people think about actually having the Assange case and important cases on their platform. And so it was a wake-up call. So when we did the postcard for that, Free Assange Elections 2024, it made people scratch their heads like, what does that mean? And so they had to read the back, and putting information on the back of the postcard is important too. So I just want to say that just be with really smart people. Julia's letters to God, watching the evolution of her letters to Senator Warren, she was so beautifully warm and personal. And here I was, like the attack dog, and she was so. I mean, we spent hours in the editing room making these letters. I mean, Julia would draft it, and I would put my fire in them. She would stand her ground and make them soft and so they were readable, and it was really a wonderful. I don't know. Opportunity.
Collaboration.
Yeah, but those letters got more feisty and feistier and feistier as the months went on. So I ended up like writing like Paula at the end.
No, that's what ended up. Julia, at one of our actions in front of Warren's house, she read the letters that were ignored. They ignored an invitation to speak with Daniel Ellsberg. I mean, that's astonishing that they refused to meet with him.
Big mistake.
Yeah.
So I think information sharing is very important because you don't know who's going to do what. I have to say a quick little thing. I got an email from the flag maker in Denver saying, "Congratulations, Julian is free."
Oh,
the flag maker that I yelled at all the time because he was always late, but he did those beautiful, wonderful, lightweight flags. He must have done, I don't know, 18 of them for me. And we educated him, and
I love that.
So people come out of the woodwork to say, because they're hearing the information that we're sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Misty, for having us on. And it was really nice.
I'm so excited to do these shows because obviously, I mean, I know Paula, I have like the people that I've worked with on events and stuff like that, but there's no way possible I could know every single Assange activist across the globe. So I'm like selfishly very excited to have these conversations with other activists and learn about what works and what doesn't and all of that stuff. And I mean, you talk about the flag maker. It's very similar to James, our billboard truck guy in DC. He just started off like we hired him to do a billboard truck, and now he's part of the family. Like he gets it. He's on board. He helps us with events. He has done some stuff for us for free. He's made bumper stickers and things like that. So it's amazing how, in my experience, once people were exposed to what Julian Assange was going through and what it meant for all of us, it was very easy to turn them into supporters. And I think we've seen that over the years. So I want to thank you all for coming on, and not just for coming on, but for all of your hard work over the years. It's been tremendously inspiring. I talk about you guys all the time because you've just been completely relentless, as we've talked about throughout the show. So thank you for all of those years of really hard work and not giving up. And I mean, I don't think Assange would be free without all of that stuff. So thank you for that. Just so everybody knows, again, this is going to be a series of shows featuring numerous people from across the globe. On Sunday, the 21st, we have the crew from Tulsa coming on. Sleepy, do you remember what time I said for that? I'm terrible at this stuff.
I'm not great at it either.
I've just got like a bunch of different dates and times in my head right now, so it's hard for me to keep everything straight, and I don't have it in front of me. But the 21st will be Tulsa. We have Denver coming on the 24th. I'm in conversations with Alex Hills from New Zealand and also Emmy from the UK. I've spoken to the Stand Up New York crew. We're pushing them back a little bit. They're just not quite ready yet. But I'm trying to get in touch with as many people as I can. I want to talk to as many people as we can. So there will be more shows coming up. So definitely keep an eye on Twitter, or just, obviously subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell thingy so that you get the notifications for when these things go out. So again, ladies, thank you so
Denver
much.
Soon too, I think.
I just said that, the 24th. Oh, okay. Did I not?
I thought it was a different one. I'm really tired.
I know. So Sunday is Tulsa. Wednesday, the 24th is Denver. And then I'm hoping to get Alex scheduled soon. And I spoke with Emmy today. We're going to set up, we got to, obviously with time zones and all of that stuff, my brain already hurts, but we're going to get everybody scheduled soon enough. So just keep an eye on Twitter and here on the YouTube channel for when those shows will be coming up. So again, ladies, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. And we will be back on Sunday with the crew from Tulsa.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.